Hello, I'm going to take you on an anti-clockwise journey around the coast of the Iberian Peninsula, starting in Denia and ending in Javia, and including some history, some geography, a few anecdotes and a lot of pictures. From Denia we'll follow the Mediterranean coast to the French border and hop over the Pyrenees to the Atlantic coast. We'll head west to A Coruña, continue around the coast of Galicia and travel the full length of Portugal to the Algarve region. We'll then follow the coast of Andalusia to Almeria and complete the final leg to Javia through Alicante. That's a journey of 3,600 kilometres. This is a new presentation, though you may be familiar with some of the content from others that I've given over the years. First, from Denia to Valencia via Gandia and Cullera. The Ducal Palace is Gandia's most important building. It goes back to the 15th century and was the home of the Dukes of Gandia. The town has a significant fishing industry and a ferry terminal with sailings to Ibiza. You may be surprised to hear that Gandia is an important holiday resort. Its 5-kilometre long beach is backed by hotel and apartment accommodation for 15,000 visitors. A short distance north of Gandia is another beach resort, Cullera. It's overlooked by the remains of a 13th century medieval fortress built on the site of an earlier Moorish castle. Beside it is the 19th century sanctuary of the Virgin of the castle. Closer to Valencia, the Albufera is a freshwater lake with an area of about 30 square kilometres. It used to be a much larger marine lagoon, but a build-up of sand dunes closed it off from the sea in the 16th century. It's surrounded by rice fields, which it helps to irrigate. Fishing has been of some importance here since the Stone Age. Revenue also comes from visitors who are taken on boat trips and who enjoy a paella in El Palmar. There's an abundance of bird life. Valencia, Spain's third largest city and a beautiful one, with a large number of outstanding buildings like the cathedral. The old Silk Exchange, the huge central market, City Hall, an astonishing 15th century palace which acquired its present appearance in the 18th century. The Biopark, one of the world's best zoos. Here's the view from the top of the Cathedral Bell Tower towards the City of Arts and Sciences and the port. The City of Arts and Sciences was designed by controversial architect Santiago de Calatrava. It opened between 1998 and 2009. It occupies a section of the dry riverbed created when the river was diverted in the 1960s as a flood control measure. I'll show you how a prescient Calatrava got his inspiration for the design of the Opera House. I should warn you that this is not pretty. Jill was nauseous for several hours when I first drew her attention to it. Sorry about that. Following that bit of unpleasantness, we shall now head for the Ebro Delta, with stops at Sagunto and Peñíscola, and a visit to Tortosa. An Iron Age tribe, the Iberians, built a hilltop fortification at Sagunto. Following an 8-month siege, it was captured in 219 BC by the Carthaginians, led by Hannibal. It was taken by the Romans just 5 years later and became an important Roman city. The 8,000-seat theatre was built in the 1st century AD, and the reconstruction work was done in the 1990s. Peñíscola is built on a rocky promontory that is almost an island. Like Sagunto, it was first fortified by the Iron Age Iberians. The present castle was built by the Knights Templar at the turn of the 14th century. Scenes from the 1961 movie El Cid were shot in Peñíscola. The town was standing in for 13th century Valencia. The closest stretch of wall was a temporary structure built to hide the modern buildings in that narrow red box. The Ebro Delta, 320 square kilometres, composed of sediment brought down by the second longest river in Iberia. A short distance upriver is the town of Tortosa. A restored castle, now a Parador hotel, overlooks the town. The sculpture was commissioned by Franco in 1960 to commemorate a nationalist victory in 1938 during the Civil War. In 2016, it was rededicated to the memory of the fallen on both sides. The view downriver to the delta from the Parador. In late December 2012, the delta was living up to its designation as a wetland. Rice is grown and parts have been drained for the production of citrus fruits. Salt is produced through the evaporation of seawater. The bird life attracts tourists. 95 species breed here and over 300 use the area as a stopover. We'll now continue our journey through Catalonia to the French border, with stops at Tarragona and Barcelona, and at several places on the Costa Brava: Tossa, Pals, Empúries, Cadaqués and Port de la Selva. Tarragona is separated from the sea by the Valencia to Barcelona railway. It was an important Roman city, one of 3 provincial capitals, together with Mérida and Córdoba. The Roman amphitheatre in Tarragona had seating for 24,000 spectators. This fragment of seating, remaining from Roman Tarragona, is interesting. Imagine you're seated at the tip of the Red Arrow. You are in a corner of the circus, the place where chariot racing takes place, and you have a great view of the contestants thundering towards you. Aside from the Roman remains, Tarragona is an interesting and attractive city to walk around, but it's not in the same league as Valencia or Barcelona. Barcelona is a major commercial port with a lot of container traffic and petrochemical activity. Las Ramblas, Barcelona's most famous thoroughfare, runs north from the waterfront. Just off Las Ramblas, the Plaza Real was laid out on the site of an old monastery. The Plaza de Catalunya is at the northern end of Las Ramblas, the place where Barcelona celebrates and demonstrates. Barcelona is famous for its Art Nouveau or modernist architecture. Here is an example of the work of the city's 3 leading exponents on the same block, a few hundred metres north of the Plaza de Catalunya. The Costa Brava, or rugged coast. In 1989, according to Wikipedia, Tossa de Mar was the first place in the world to declare itself an anti-bullfighting community. Pals, a village on a hill, has an attractive, well-preserved medieval centre. Here are the remains of the town of Emporion, meaning trading place, founded by the Greeks in 575 BC. In 218 BC, the Romans landed nearby to begin the task of sweeping the Carthaginians out of Spain, and the Roman town soon absorbed the Greek one. Cadaqués is a lovely place. It was a sleepy fishing village before the coming of mass tourism. Much of it has been bought up as second homes for people from Barcelona. Salvador Dalí has a home nearby. This is not the sort of picture that you would associate with Dalí. Painted in 1923, he was only 19 and had not yet become a surrealist. Port de la Selva, 18 kilometres from the French border. It's a small town with around 1,000 year-round residents. We had a great holiday there in the summer of 1976, a few months before we emigrated to Canada. I don't know where that hair came from, and I don't know where it went. After a quick hop the length of the Pyrenees, we shall continue the tour by heading west from Hondarribia. In the province of Guipúzcoa, Hondarribia is on the border opposite the French town of Hendaye. The town occupies an easily defended, elevated position, supplemented by a strong wall. Inside the medieval walls, the streets are attractive. Leaving Hondarribia, we shall visit the Basque towns of San Sebastian, Guernica and Bilbao. This is the view from the high road between Hondarribia and San Sebastian. The main feature of San Sebastian is the sheltered crescent-shaped bay with a promontory at each end, Monte Igeldo to the west and Monte Urgell to the east. This is the view from Monte Igeldo. The beach and its perfect setting are the principal features that underlie the city's prosperity. It was given a huge boost in the middle of the 19th century. First, the royal family began to spend their summers here, and the nobility and political and administrative elite followed them. Second, the railway came in 1864. Alfonso XIII became king in 1886, on the day he was born. His father had died during the pregnancy, and his mother, Maria Cristina, served as regent until his 16th birthday. She brought the family to San Sebastian every summer. One of Queen Victoria's granddaughters, known as Ina, joined the family in 1906 when she married Alfonso. Maria Cristina had Palacio Miramar built as a royal residence. It occupies a superb location with lawns running down to the sea. But the lawns are on land that is artificial, a build-up of material brought in to cover a false tunnel. The royals could then stroll down to the sea without having to mix with the riffraff. With many interesting and attractive buildings, there's more to the city than the beach. West of San Sebastian, there are several small resort towns with good beaches, like Zarautz and Guetaria. Guetaria was the birthplace of an important Basque sailor, Juan Sebastian Elcano, the first to sail around the world. We should meet him again when we get to Andalusia. In between the sandy bays, the Basque coast is rugged. The town of Guernica in the Basque province of Vizcaya. Early in the Civil War, Franco arranged for German and Italian bombers to attack the town. They targeted civilians, and estimates of the number killed range from 300 to 1,650. The atrocity inspired Picasso to paint one of the most powerful anti-war pictures ever created. This life-size tile replica is in the town. Bilbao, the capital of the province of Vizcaya. The city centre is about 15 kilometres upriver from the port. City Hall, a theatre from the same time period. The Guggenheim Museum of Modern Art, designed by the Canadian-American architect Frank Gehry and opened in 1997. It's made of limestone and glass with titanium cladding. There are 11,000 square metres of exhibition space. It transformed the fortunes of a decaying city. Leaving the Basque Country, we'll travel along the coast of Cantabria, stopping at Castro Urdiales, Laredo, the capital Santander, Santillana del Mar and San Vicente de la Barquera. Castro Urdiales began as a Roman city at the centre of an iron mining region. The port area is overlooked by a fine Gothic church and a castle, both of which go back to the 12th and 13th centuries. The main activities today are catering to seaside holidaymakers and fishing and fish processing. Laredo has a 5-kilometre long beach and is a prominent seaside resort. To get from Laredo to Santander, you can shorten the distance by taking a route that involves 2 ferries. This is the first one. It doesn't work for motorists, but cyclists are welcome. And the second. On both ferries, it's a bit of a challenge getting your bicycle and kit on and off, and you spend a lot of time hanging around waiting for the next sailing. If I were doing it again, I'd stay on the road and pedal the extra kilometres. Of course, Santander also deals with much larger ferries. Unlike Bilbao, the terminal is close to downtown. The city is a major service centre with many institutions and corporations represented, including, of course, the Santander Banking Group, whose headquarters are here, and the town is a major conference venue. As in many other Spanish cities, the post office is an impressive building. You'll remember that San Sebastian benefited from royal patronage. Well, Santander stole that business when the city built a palace for the royal family, the Palacio de la Magdalena. And from 1913, Alfonso XIII and his entourage and hangers-on preferred to spend their summers in Santander. Today it is a visitor attraction and a conference centre. Santillana del Mar lies about 30 kilometres beyond Santander. It's a beautiful small town with a stunning 12th century Romanesque church that has an exquisite cloister. The town is usually crowded, so stay overnight. You can then enjoy the evening after the coach parties have left, and the following morning before the next lot arrives. A little further on, the town of Comillas has one of the few buildings outside the Barcelona area designed by Antoni Gaudí. El Capricho, built for a local man who returned home after making a fortune in South America. Our last stop in Cantabria, another town dependent on fishing and tourism, the picturesque San Vicente de la Barquera. This 32-arch bridge was built in the 16th century. The main buildings in the old town are strung out along a ridge. We shall now make a few stops on the coast of Asturias, including Gijón, the largest town in the province. Llanes is an attractive place with a fishing industry that used to include whaling. On the left the town hall, and on the right the casino. That's a social club, not a gambling venue. There was a good deal of emigration from Asturias and Galicia in the late 19th and early 20th centuries to South America. Like the fellow for whom Gaudí designed El Capricho, some returned and flaunted their wealth by building grand homes and funding public buildings. The casino is an example from 1910. These wealthy returnees are called Indianos. A feature of Llanes is a decorated seawall by a Basque artist, Agustín Ibarrola. Riba de Sella is a pleasant, well-groomed town at the mouth of the River Sella. The town goes crazy on the first Saturday in August, when there's a 20-kilometre race downriver to the town involving more than 1,000 kayaks. The contest, which began in 1930, attracts a huge crowd to what is now a 4-day party. Asturias is famous for dairy products and cider or sidra, and Villaviciosa is the sidra capital of Asturias. The apples are washed, chopped and pressed, and the juice is fermented in barrels for 6 months. The remains of the mashed apples are fed to cattle. Pouring cider to bring out its natural effervescence is an art that has to be mastered by all bar staff in Asturias. This sculpture in Villaviciosa is one of my favourites. It honours a local man, the patriarch of a cider-making family. And here's a tribute to one of the workers. In Gijón, a tribute to the product itself, the tree of cider composed of 3,200 bottles. Gijón is the largest town in Asturias. To the west there's heavy industry which has seen better days, like steel towns in the UK. Industrialisation began in the mid-19th century based on local coal and iron ore. This is a statue of the first king of Asturias, Peleo. After the Moorish invasion of Iberia in 711, he is credited with defeating the Moors just a few years later at the Battle of Covadonga to the southeast of Gijón, the first step in the Christian reconquest of the peninsula. And our last stop in Asturias, the fishing port of Luarca. We enter Galicia at Ribadeo, and we shall work our way around to Vigo, the principal stopping places being A Coruña, Fisterra, Ogrove and Pontevedra. We've already seen a couple of buildings built for or by Indianos, emigrants who returned to their homeland after making a fortune in the colonies. There are several in Ribadeo, like this mansion built by the Moreno brothers. And the town's central market was funded by Ramón González. To the west of Ribadeo there's some wonderful coastal scenery. In economic terms, A Coruña is the most important city in Galicia. It's a major port, has a strong service sector, and is a manufacturing and technology centre. The core of A Coruña is on a peninsula that is close to being an island. Its most iconic building dates from the Roman period, a lighthouse, the Tower of Hercules. In fact, the current building is 18th century, but with some masonry in the foundations that was part of the Roman structure. The San Antón Castle was built to guard the old town. Today, access is controlled from the Port Authority's offices. Fisterra, to the Romans the end of the known world, Finis Terrae. A road leads from the small town to a lighthouse 3 kilometres away. The lighthouse was built in the 19th century. Modern technology has made it redundant, and the building is now a museum and visitor centre. At Fisterra, I met this Hungarian guy with an interesting story. He'd walked from the French side of the Pyrenees to Santiago de Compostela and on to Fisterra, and he was taking the donkey to a sanctuary up the coast at Murcia before returning home. He had bought the donkey early in his walk near Pamplona, funding the purchase through a few days of busking, playing tunes on that whistle in his right hand. He hadn't ridden the donkey, he'd walked with it, and it had carried his kit. Some of those who follow the pilgrim routes to Santiago de Compostela continue on to Fisterra, as I did in 2014. Just below the lighthouse there's a fire pit for the ritual of burning an item of old clothing, such as a pair of socks or a t-shirt, symbolising spiritual and physical renewal. In earlier centuries, this ritual of renewal took place on a beach to the west of the town, and it was common for people to burn all their old clothes. The beach is a delightful spot. I found the idea of renewal irresistible, and I began to burn my old clothes. I was down to my shoes, socks and helmet before it suddenly hit me. I didn't have any new clothes. And there's not a whole lot by way of menswear retailing in the area. I headed back to Santiago and set out on foot. Now those of you who've walked naked through streets of a Spanish town, you'll know that you get one of two reactions. Some people pretend that you aren't there and look right past you, whereas others take a sneaky look. It wasn't easy to get directions because whenever I approached anyone, they backed away, but eventually my goal was in view. And 20 minutes later, I was pleased to have put the whole episode behind me. Putting that aside, let's continue around the coast from Fisterra to the town of Fay. These are some of the entries in a competition between teams of high school students invited to create a tile mosaic on a maritime theme. What a brilliant idea. Cambados is an attractive old town. It's at the centre of the Albarino wine region. Agrove is another town that thrives on fishing and tourism. There's a large aquaculture industry here, producing shellfish on strings dangling underneath wooden rafts. Mussels are the most important crop. They also grow scallops and oysters. There are some fine beaches on the coast of Pontevedra. Sanxenxo is the largest seaside resort on a coast with a climate that makes Blackpool and Southport look arid. There are many oreos in Galicia for food storage, particularly grain. Combero is famous for them. Each one has three important features: slatted sides to allow air to circulate, mushroom-shaped legs to keep rodents out, and a cross to solicit help from the Almighty. The city of Pontevedra, the provincial capital. This chapel, like many others in the region, has a representation of St. James in the form of a pilgrim. We're close to the Portuguese border now, and Vigo is our last stop in Galicia. In terms of population, it's the largest town in the region. It is Spain's most important fishing port, and there's a large fish processing and canning industry there. There's a shipbuilding industry specialising in large high-tech fishing vessels, and the Peugeot Citroën plant produces 400,000 vehicles per annum. And there's a lot of container traffic and a cruise terminal. We'll enter Portugal at Valença. After stops in Porto, Coimbra and Lisbon, we'll follow the Algarve coast and return to Spain. Lying on the border with Spain, Valença has been of considerable strategic importance. The old town is surrounded by 5 kilometres of ramparts. It was first walled in the 13th century to repel French and Spanish invasions. The present ramparts are 17th century. The town overlooks an 1879 bridge designed by Gustav Eiffel, carrying a railway on top and a road underneath. At the mouth of the Douro River, Porto is the second largest metropolitan area in Portugal after Lisbon. This 1886 iron bridge is emblematic of the city. The views from the top level, 60 metres above the river, are spectacular. The town of Vila Nova de Gaia is on the south bank of the river. The long buildings are the premises of the port wine producers. Port is a wine that is fortified with a distilled neutral grape spirit, and companies blend and age their product here. The vineyards are upriver, and the wine used to be shipped down in boats like these. They are there now for the benefit of tourists. The wine comes down in tanker trucks. Getting around Porto's steep streets requires a bit of effort. This weekly market sells nothing but cage birds and related products. Blue tiles like those on the church in the background are everywhere in Portugal. Here are some of the 20,000 in the main hall of Porto's train station. When you travel by bicycle, as I was when I visited Porto, you minimise the amount of clothing that you carry with you by frequently washing out what you do have. Don't burn any though, you might regret it. I stayed here for a couple of nights, and this notice was on my bathroom wall. We got laundry service. Do not wash your clothes in the room or we will charge more half day. I went out to see the sights, leaving a smoking gun draped over the bath taps and shower head. The maid must have decided not to turn me in because I wasn't asked to pay the 50% surcharge. Coimbra, an old city on a hill overlooking the river Mondego, was the capital of Portugal from the mid-12th to mid-13th century. I stayed there 3 nights waiting for the frequent heavy showers to end and the threatening cloud to disperse. Portugal's oldest university was founded in Lisbon in 1290. It was moved permanently to Coimbra by John III in 1537. And a final note on Coimbra, an astonishing small piece of graffiti, a series of stencils of John Cleese from Monty Python's Ministry of Silly Walks sketch. I've no idea who put it there or why. I wish I did. And on to Lisbon, the Roman town of Olisipo, at the estuary of the longest river on the Iberian Peninsula, the River Tajo, called the Tagus in Spain. The Moorish castle, now named after St. George, overlooks the town. There are several squares in Lisbon, in which a former ruler looks down from a great height. These squares were created during the clean-up process following a devastating earthquake in 1755. The Romanesque cathedral was built on the site of the main mosque in the 12th century, following the Christian reconquest of the Moors. The Belém Tower was built in 1515 to guard the entrance to Lisbon harbour. Portugal was the wealthiest nation in Europe at the time, after explorer Vasco da Gama had opened up a trade route to India. The tower was built in a flamboyant Gothic style known as Manueline, named after Manuel I, who was king at the time. Close to the Belém Tower, the monastery of the Hieronymites was founded by Manuel to honour Portugal's golden age, and was funded by revenue from spice imports. Lisbon has a wonderful fleet of streetcars. Jill and I took a packed one to visit the Belém Tower and the nearby monastery. We eventually got seats after an inspector entered by the front door to check people's tickets. Immediately, half of the occupants disappeared through the rear door. We shall finish the Portuguese section by travelling along the coast of the Algarve region from the west to the Spanish border in the east, a distance of about 150 kilometres. Much of the coast is rugged, particularly towards the west. Lagos has a long history as a port. Europe's first slave market was established here in 1444. Albufeira is the leading Algarve destination for package holidays. And golf is a major attraction for visitors to the region. Faro is the administrative capital and has the only international airport. The old town, within the medieval walls, is relatively unspoiled. And built on both sides of a broad river, Tavira is an attractive town about 25 kilometres from the Spanish border. At Ayamonte, the Guadiana International Bridge brings motorists into Andalusia from the Algarve. It opened in 1992. Until then you had to use a car ferry. We shall follow the coast of Andalusia to Almería, with stops at Palos, Sanlúcar and Cádiz, and on the Costa del Sol. Columbus's first voyage in 1492 sailed from Palos. There's an excellent museum that includes full-size replicas of the ships. The Doñana National Park lies a short distance along the coast from Palos. The 550 square kilometre park, the green shaded area, was established in 1969. Access is restricted, but you can take trips into the park from Sanlúcar de Barrameda. You take a ferry across the river from Sanlúcar and board an all-terrain minibus. The area is a delta blocked off from the sea by a build-up of sand dunes. There are three distinct areas: the dunes that have become stabilised scrubland, and the wetland or marisma in blue. The dunes, the stabilised scrubland, and the wetland, which was dry because it was September when we were there. The park is home to animals, including boar and deer, and there's an enormous range of bird life. The star attraction is the Iberian lynx, if you're lucky enough to see one. We weren't. Sanlúcar is one of the points on the Sherry Triangle, the others being Puerto de Santa Maria and of course Jerez. Fernando Magellan's expedition for the Spanish crown left from Sanlúcar in 1519 to find a western route to the Spice Islands in Indonesia. The Treaty of Tordesillas in 1494 had given Portugal a monopoly on the eastern route. The expedition turned out to be the first ever to circumnavigate the globe. 5 ships left with 265 men. Magellan died in the Philippines, and 3 years after their departure, just one ship, the Victoria, and 18 men returned to Sanlúcar under the Basque sailor Juan Sebastián Elcano, whose statue we saw earlier in his hometown of Guetaria. Surrounded by water, Cádiz occupies an unusual position. It's the oldest continuously occupied city in Spain, established by the Phoenicians in 1000 BC. It was a Roman port and naval base, and there's still a naval presence today. Trade with the Americas made the 18th century a golden age for Cádiz, and in 1808 Cádiz held out against Napoleon's invasion and was the Spanish seat of government throughout the Peninsular War. The cathedral was begun in 1722, but not finished until 1853 because they ran out of money as trade declined. Marbella, a major resort on the Costa del Sol. The old quarter is attractive, but is far too busy in the summer. In Fuengirola there are high-rise buildings along the seafront. Some are little boxes made of tiki-taki, little boxes all the same. Malaga was founded by the Phoenicians in 800 BC. Later it was in Carthaginian hands and then Roman. It was Moorish until it fell to the Christians in 1487, a short time before the fall of Granada. The town is overlooked by Moorish buildings, a castle and a palace, with origins in the 10th century. The Roman theatre is in the foreground. The cathedral was built in the 16th to 18th centuries. One of the two planned towers is missing. They had the funding, but gave it to the Americans in the 1770s in support of their War of Independence against the British. The large white area in this satellite image of Almería is 32 kilometres across and has an area of over 300 square kilometres. It's a sea of plastic greenhouses. The city of Almería was a major port for the Romans and for the Moors, and is a ferry port today, with sailings to North Africa. Little remains of the Romans, but the 10th century Moorish castle is still substantial. We'll end our trip along the coast of Andalusia at Cabo de Gata, east of the city of Almería. On our final leg, we'll pass through the province of Murcia, with stops at Águilas and Cartagena, before reaching Alicante and following the Costa Blanca coastline to Javier. In Águilas, that hilltop has been occupied by a succession of cultures, including the Carthaginians, Romans and Moors. Águilas has been a significant port in the past, but today the town is dependent on summer visitors and agriculture, citrus fruits and crops grown under plastic. Cartagena has a fine natural harbour, and there was a great deal of mineral wealth in the area, principally silver. The Carthaginians founded the city in 227 BC as their Spanish capital. It has been an important naval base ever since, right up to the present. As I said earlier, the Romans landed at Empúries on today's Costa Brava to remove the Carthaginians from Spain. Working south, following success at Sagunto, they took Cartagena just 9 years later in 209 BC. The Roman theatre has been restored in recent years. Alicante, dominated by the castle, named after Santa Barbara because it was captured from the Moors on her feast day in 1248 by Alfonso X of Castile. The view from the castle. Villa Joyosa with its colourfully painted houses. Benidorm, looking to the west and to the east, and the incongruous meeting of the two halves. The cliffs between Benidorm and Altea. The beautiful town of Altea. And looking towards Calpe. Calpe's Peñón de Ifach rising to 332 metres above sea level. The view from the top, as seen 20 years ago by Jill and me. At the summit we saw a mountain rescue team. My first thought was that Jill had called them to ask them to take her back down. It turned out that they'd been rescuing a couple of rock climbers who had got into difficulties the previous evening. And looking back at the Peñón from Moreira. The end of our 3,600 kilometre journey. Now this talk is dedicated to a long-time resident of Javier, a venerable old gent who spent his life on the coast of Spain and died about a year ago. We called him Ginge. He used to hang out on the seafront in the port near the Casa del Cable. He was very frail when these pictures were taken on Christmas Day 2019, the last time we saw him. Thank you very much for accompanying me.